So we're going to start the message today with a little bit of trivia. This will be really hard, so don't beat yourself up if you can't figure this out. I'm going to give you a series of pictures. I'm going to ask you to guess who they are, and you don't have to guess out loud, just guess in your mind. So this man was born right around the turn of the century, 1900, on Christmas Day. This is him as a young man, early 20s. He would go on to become the highest paid actor of his generation. The highest paid actor of his generation. Now, if you like classic movies, black and whites, things like that, then you certainly have seen him. It's a guarantee. But chances are you may not recognize him from his younger pictures. This is what he looked like at the prime of his career. Humphrey Bogart, one of my all-time favorite actors. I love black and white movies, I love old movies, and I love Humphrey Bogart's acting. The interesting thing about Humphrey Bogart is he died in 1957. He's been dead now for 64 years, but look at this again with me. A moment ago, that was Humphrey. And then just a moment passed, and here he was in his 20s. And then another moment passed, and he was at the height of his career, and now 64 years have passed since he took a breath on earth. And it just went like that. All of you are smart enough to understand that time on earth goes really, really fast. But here's the challenge of that. We don't spend much time thinking about it. Actually, some of you might even be thinking, that sounds like a morbid thing to even think about. Why would I want to spend any time thinking about the fact that my time on earth goes so fast? Great question, and really an essential question, because there's a prayer in the Bible that many of you, I bet that none of you, I've never prayed it, but I bet that most of you have never prayed this prayer in the Bible. But look at what the psalmist wrote. He said this, Lord, remind me how brief my time on earth will be. Remind me that my days are numbered and that my life is fleeing away. So look at three things he prays for. God, remind me how brief my time on earth is. Isn't your time on earth brief? Remind me that days have a number. There's only a set amount of days that I will have on this planet. And every morning I wake up, another day is gone. My days are numbered. And then he said, remind me that my life is fleeing away. As you get older, you don't really need to pray that as much because you become much more aware of it. But he said, God, I want you to make this clear inside of me. Now, why would you pray a prayer like that? Why would you pray, God? Because again, these sound like morbid themes. But here's the problem with this. Because we don't spend any time thinking about it, typically the only time we think about it is at a funeral, right? It's typically the only time we think about it. Otherwise, it doesn't come up very often in our minds, is that you have two competing values for your soul. You have the values of this world, and you have God's values. And they're very different. And because we don't spend any time thinking about eternity, and we only think about earth, again, this is what the Bible teaches. Earth is like this tiny little speck of time that we get here, and it goes by fast, and then we go into eternity. And there are these two values. There are the values of earth and the values of eternity. These are the values of earth. Things like money. Get more money, have more money, store up more money, save more money, earn more money. Pleasure. I mean, for goodness sakes, we are in a society that is devoted to pleasure. What's going to make me happy? What's next? What's next? What's next? And it never, ever, ever, ever satisfies. And then accomplishments, right? Success is a big deal in American society. How can I be more successful and more successful and more successful? And I want more and more and more. Bigger, better, more is the way of American society right now. These are the values of earth. And they consume so many people who say that they follow Jesus. And they are in direct competition to the values of eternity. Look at what the values, when you understand that your time on earth is really, really short, and you shift to thinking about eternity, these are the values of the things of eternity. Servanthood, because whoever you serve in the name of Jesus, God takes that personally and it counts forever. That's the value of eternity. Doing the will of God, because he's created you, you're returning to him rapidly, and you'll be with him forever. So doing his will while you have this short time on earth, that's the value of eternity. ever-increasing sacrificial generosity, because it's the only time in the Bible I'm aware of where he says, by the way, when you give it away out of love, it becomes eternal. It stores up forever in eternity. That's a value of eternity. And then caring for your soul, because you're not a human being with a soul. You're a soul, or you're not a human body with a soul. You're a soul that has a human body, and that human body is temporary. The soul isn't. The body is very temporary. Every year I get a new ache and pain. Every year. And this old body is wearing out rapidly. This old body is wearing out rapidly. But my soul will never wear out. It's eternal. So if we were to look at, if I were to ask you two questions, first off, which of these lists do you really value? I think most Christians would say, I really value the second list. Great. Then I would ask the next question. If we looked at how you spent your time this last week, would we see that you value the list of eternal things? Or would we see that you really value that first list? Now, this may seem like something that seems insignificant, but it is so significant. And I want to try and drive this home in this brand new series we're starting today. Because, and you'll hear this more as we get into the topic today, the reality is we aren't made for this earth. We're made for eternity. We're just here temporarily. And we have to start thinking about eternity and make our values line up with the things that have eternal value, not earthly value. It's so significant to get this. And here's the question that I'm going to try and ask you to think about for the next 4 weeks to try and help drive this change home. If you went to see the doctor this next week, and the doctor gave you the news that you only have 30 days to live. That's going to happen to people this week, right? All across the country. That will happen. There will be people who will get the results back this next week from the doctor, and it'll be, the days are numbered, and here's the number. If it happened to you, what values would shift in your life? I mean, if you suddenly got that message from the doctor this week that you have 30 days to live, would you care about who's going to win the Super Bowl in February? You're not going to make it. Would you care about the new car releases in 2022? You'll never see them. Will you care about the return on investment for your retirement portfolio? It will suddenly, all of a sudden, all of your priorities will be realigned, won't they? If you got that message, all your priorities would shift. And we would start to live the way we're supposed to be living all the time. So that's why we're doing this series. Starting today, 30 days to live, and for the next 30 days, I'm going to ask you to imagine with me, what if you only had 30 days to live? What would change? And shouldn't we change that now? Shouldn't we start making those changes now? And we're going to start by talking about this. I want to ask you to open up your program, and inside you'll find these notes. I want to ask you to grab these notes. There are some things I really want you to write down. And of course, welcome to those of you who are watching online. Love to know that you're watching. Thanks for the emails that you send. So if you're watching at our website at PennyOldChurchLife.com, we want to encourage you to open up the notes. If you're watching on YouTube, on our YouTube channel, the notes are right in the description. So this is really important that you consider this stuff. So let's jump right into this. There's 3 things I want to talk about today. The very first thing is, if you knew you had 30 days to live, the very first thing is you would want to start living a regret-free life. Now, obviously, we want to do that well before the final 30. But we would want to start taking care of things that we regret. If you're a reader, you may want to pick up this woman's book, Bronnie Ware. You can see the title of the book, The Top 5 Regrets of the Dying. She was a palliative nurse for years and years and years. So she cared for people at their final days, and she did it for years. So she would get called in anywhere from 12 weeks before to 3 weeks before, and she would walk through people in their final breaths. She was by the side of who knows how many people as they died. And over again, when you're with the dying, they say things. And she noticed there are patterns to what they say. As a matter of fact, there are repeated things that dying people say, and she thought, you guys need to know this because this is going to affect you. And so she talked about the 5 regrets of the dying. Number one thing that the dying say is, I wish I had the courage to live a life true to myself and not the life others expected of me. And here's what she said about it. It's the most common regret of all. She said, when people think that their life is almost over, they look back clearly on it, and it's easy to see how many dreams have gone unfulfilled. Most people haven't honored even half of their dreams, and they had to die knowing that it was due to choices that they had made or not made. And she said, it's too late once you lose your health. Health brings a freedom that few realize. Isn't that a profound statement? Health brings a freedom that few realize, because if your health is taken away, all of a sudden you can't chase your dreams. You take your health for granted. She said, on their deathbed, they wanted so badly to knock other things off their bucket list, but they had to die knowing that they still had those dreams unfulfilled. And she said, don't die with dreams in your heart. Don't die knowing that you lived for someone else's dreams or stuffed yours under the rug. Is that your future? What would you regret not doing? If you got the notice you had 30 days to live, especially if your health was gone, what would you regret not doing? And all of us have a someday list, right? All of us do. All of us have a someday. I'll get around to that someday, and we put all kinds of things on that someday list. Someday I'll really prioritize my friendships. Someday I'll tell that person how much they mean to me. Someday I'll make that apology. I'll start that hobby. I'll pursue my dream job someday. Someday I'll ask them out. Someday I'll get serious about God. Someday I'll talk to my friend about Jesus. Someday. And we can put so many different things on a list. And what we're saying is turn the good intentions into action. Because here's what the Bible says about your someday. Look at this. How do you know what your life will be like tomorrow? Your life is like the morning fog. It's here a little while and then it's gone. Isn't that true? All of you past a certain age know that. It's like, here we are. It's the midway point of November, and another year is almost over. And it went like that. Our lives are fog, and then all of a sudden, you've seen it, you've driven to work or been out in the morning, and all of a sudden there's a heavy fog, and then the sun comes up and the fog just dissipates. It's gone. He said, that's what our lives are like. They're just here today, gone tomorrow. A moment ago, Humphrey Bogart was that child, then he was that young man, and then he was the best paid actor in Hollywood, and now he's been gone for 64 years. Our lives are a mist, they're a vapor. And then he says this, so since this is true, Ecclesiastes says, if you wait for perfect conditions, what will you get done? You'll never get anything done. Don't wait. So here's what I really want to challenge you with. And matter of fact, flip your notes over in the back. The second question down, if you were certain your life, as you know, it would end in a few weeks, what would be your biggest regret? And I, for the first time in my life, I've never done this. I never actually sat down and started thinking, what would I want? What would my biggest regrets be? You've all heard the phrase bucket list. You know, before you kick the bucket, what would you like to do? What would be on your list? This was a hard assignment for me. I sat down, I started working on it this last week for the first time in my life. I've never thought this way. Most of the things I want to do, I just go and do them. So it's not my nature not to do it, but I found things and I started writing things down on my list of things that I was neglecting or ignoring or really putting on my someday list that I would regret. I wonder what you'll find if you do that assignment. Number one regret of the dying is I wish I would have done it. Don't settle for those regrets. Live in the moment, start to think about what do I really, really want to do? What do I feel called by God to do? And how can I start doing that? Now, the second thing that has to happen is you have to keep your priorities in line. Now, your priorities would immediately be fixed for you if you got that message from your doctor this week. You would know what's important and what's not important. If you got that message this week that your time was numbered and you knew the number, you wouldn't need this. Your priorities would all of a sudden be in line. Do you know what one of the top regrets of people are when they're dying? Look at this. I wish I had stayed in touch with my friends. Isn't that an interesting one? That surprised me when I read it. One of the top regrets of the dying is they wish they had their friends. Here's what she said about it. She says that everyone misses their friends when they're dying. Listen, did you hear that? Everyone misses their friends when they're dying. She said often they wouldn't realize the full benefits of friends until their dying weeks. And many, of course, had become so caught up in their own lives that they had let their friendships slip by over the years. And there were many deep regrets about not giving friendships the time and effort that they deserved. Isn't that the two things you need, right? Time and effort to build those friendships. Here's what she said. I thought this was so profound. It all comes down to love and relationships in the end. That's all that remains in the final weeks are love and relationships. Did you know that? That's it. Your money won't matter. Your accomplishments, your awards. You think you'll be laying in the hospital bed with 30 days to go saying, bring me my trophies from high school. Really want to see those again. Bring me my checkings, my checkbook, because I want to see how much money I got in there. You think you care? Your priorities will immediately be shifted, right? The values of the earth won't matter, but the values of eternity will really matter. That's what will happen automatically in that day. So the key is this. You shape your values. You reshape your values so that what you value most are relationships, right? That's what we're going to miss. Life is all about relationships. At the end, that's what we're going to want, are relationships. So we need to shape our values so that relationships are what matters most to us now. And this is really hard. And it's been hard for thousands of years. It's not new with us in our society. Moses, one of the most important figures in the Bible, got so wrapped up in his job, and his job was leading the nation of Israel across the desert to the promised land, that he actually did this. Here's what happened. In Exodus 18, after Moses had sent away his wife Zipporah, his father-in-law Jethro received her. He was so busy, he had no time for his wife and kids, and he literally sent them away back home to be with their family because he had no time for them. Now, thankfully, if you read that story in Exodus 18, his father-in-law is like, oh, this ain't right. And he came and met with Moses and taught him how to reprioritize his life so that he would have time for his wife and kids. Thank goodness. Thank goodness. Because he was making the wrong decision. One of the saddest moments, I've been a pastor now for over 30 years. One of the saddest moments of my entire career was the first funeral I ever did. I was really young. Got a call one day from a funeral home. They said, this person has passed away. We don't have anyone to do the ceremony. Would you consider coming and doing it? And I said, okay. And so I went and met with the person that was at the funeral home, gave me a little information. There was no family to meet with. There were a couple of people that were friends, and they gave me a couple of ideas. And so I put together my first ever funeral service. And the funeral home hosted it in this room, not too different from this room. And I stood up that morning in front of 6 people. Nobody was there. Nobody cried. There was no emotion in the room. The service took 15 minutes, and then it was over. And it was one of the saddest moments of my entire career. His life meant so little to anybody in this world that nobody even cared that he was gone. What were his final 30 days like? What were his final 30 days like? How lonely were they? Probably it was the continuation of a lot of loneliness in his life. One of the saddest things I've ever seen. On your deathbed, you will want the people you love around you. So you know what that means is you better be prioritizing relationships now. Right? That's what it means. You better be prioritizing your relationships right now so that they are most important for you. Relationships are most important. So that means a couple of things. First, it means we need to cut back on all the things that distract us from relationships, right? And there's so many in this world. It's just crazy. Our world is full of distractions. Every day there's a new TV package you can buy, right? With 12 new channels, and you can watch all of this all the time, anytime you want. You got about 4,000 TV channels you can watch and endless amounts of entertainment to distract us, right? It's interesting, the Bible is really serious about eliminating distractions. Look at what it says in 1 Corinthians. It says, those who use the things of this world should not become attached to them, for this world as we know it will soon pass away. So he says, again, it's not wrong to have things. It's not wrong to use things. The problem is when we become attached to things. That's the problem. And he says, things are temporary. Don't make things your focus. Don't make things your focus. And as Americans, we've made things our focus. We are all about things. I've talked many times about the fact that in the 1950s, family sizes were bigger, houses were smaller. And now today, house sizes are 2.5 times as big as they were in the 50s, and family sizes are smaller. It's like, we need 1,000 square feet for everyone in the house. You get 1,000, you get 1,000, you get 1,000, right? It's like, we just need more and more and more and more and more. And we just never stop saying enough is enough. It's always about bigger, better, more in America. We need bigger, better cars, newer cars, always new features. I mean, we just need more all the time. And it's all about things. And he says, listen, there's nothing wrong with having things, but don't get attached to things, because on your deathbed, you think you'll want a picture of your car. Bring me a picture of my car. I really want to see it one more time. I want a picture of my new dishwasher. Oh, that Bosch. I want to hold it in my arms one more time as I'm dying here, right? You think you'll care? You won't care. You will care zero. Your values will be shifted for you automatically in that day. So shift them now. And he says, because all those things are passing away. Matter of fact, the interesting thing is, remember, it's all about relationships. You know what he says 2 verses after this? 2 verses right after this, like, put things down, keep things down here, money and possessions, they have their place, you can use them, don't get attached to them. You know what's really important? 2 verses later, he goes on to say this. If you're married, a married man, here's what you should be thinking about. About earthly responsibilities, how he can please his wife, because it's all about relationships. Men, how many of you spent hours this last week thinking about how you could make your wife happier, and so much happier that she chose to say yes to you? Right? Because it's all about relationships. It's not about things. He says, put things down. Don't get attached to those. But if you're married, you're attached. And your job now is to think about the relationship. And how can you make your wife happy that she said yes to you? And then the very next verse, now men, don't feel picked on, because the very next verse after they said, and by the way, married women, it's now your job to think about, he turns it right around and says, married women, you have to think about this. How can you please your husband? You know why? Because it's all about relationships. It's all about relationships. It's all about relationships. How can we shift this so that the priorities in our lives are really being addressed? You all know this. The number one biggest distractor in America right now is work. Number one. Number 2 regret of the dying is, I wish I didn't work so hard. Number 2 regret of all dying people. And you know what she said, which just was profound to me? 100% of dying men said this. There was never a man she cared for in her career who was dying who said, man, I wish I would have worked more. Every man said, I wish I would have cut back. Every man. Because they missed time with their kids, and they missed their kids' childhood, and they missed time with their spouse, and they missed time with their friends because they had to work and work and work and work and work, and they couldn't turn that off. And they missed everything important, because life is about relationships. So here's the filter question that you can use. Would you say yes to this opportunity if you only had 30 days to live? Because life gives us more than we can do, right? You can't sign up for everything, you can't do everything. So would you say yes to this if you only had 30 days to live? But the other thing is obviously not just cutting back on our distractions, it's also essential that you tell the people that you love what they need to hear. It was the number 3 regret of people who are dying, is I wish I had the courage to tell them how I felt about them. So tell the people you love what you need to hear. One of the constant regrets she heard from dying people is, I wish I would have said I love you more often. I wish I would have told you, the people that I loved them more often. It's one of the top regrets of dying people. As a matter of fact, I was reading about an interview with a counselor who's been a counselor for decades. And the person asked him and said, what's the most common thing that you see in your counseling? And he said, I've worked with hundreds and hundreds of people. And the most common denominator I've seen is this. I'll always ask, do you believe that your dad was proud of you? Almost everybody would either say, no, I don't, or I'm not sure. It's tragic. Because we're not saying the things that need to be said to the people that we actually love. It's just not coming out. This is huge pain for me. Huge pain. From 2002 to 2016, my job became my life. I, for those 14 years, worked 6 days a week, and most weeks, 7 days. And a sick part of me was proud of it. I had to go to counseling to figure out what was under all that. But there was something driving me in very unhealthy ways. I knew it was wrong at the time. I knew something was off. I knew my kids were really suffering because Dad was gone, and I just never stopped it, and I never dealt with why I was doing it. There's a reason why you do that. It's the single greatest regret of my life. Because a moment changed. And all those kids are gone and grown out and out of the house, and now I chase time with them. The greatest regret. Don't live with that regret. You keep your priorities in line, and you understand relationships are what it's all about. Relationships with God, your family, and your friends. Which brings me to the third one. And some of you are like, oh, for goodness sakes, we're at a church, so he's got to say this. He's got to say something about Jesus. Turn your heart to Jesus, right? Because that's what you have to say when you're a pastor. And the truth is, most Christians have turned some of their life to Jesus. I mean, some of it. It's like, well, a little bit of my heart is aimed at Jesus. And if you ask Christians, they're like, yeah, we like Jesus. He's cool. He's a good guy. He's good. Thank goodness he did some good things for us. But I mean, the truth is, to the average Christian every day, Jesus Christ is fairly unimportant. That's just the honest thing. When you look at, again, how Christians spend their time each day, he's unimportant. Because according to everything we continue to read, the average Christian spends no time in prayer each day. The average Christian won't crack their Bible at all this next week. To spend a little bit of time reading about Jesus, they won't do that. It just doesn't seem important. He doesn't seem important. Matter of fact, if you offered Christians the opportunity to spend 5 minutes praying or the opportunity to go online and see the newest shit sales from Amazon, which do you think is going to win? Or if you offer Christians the opportunity just to open up the book of John and read a little bit about just one chapter, take you 2 minutes, about the life of Jesus, and just spend 2 minutes a day just reading about Jesus and who he is and what he said, or watching the brand new series from Netflix that just came out and binge watching that, which, again, what do we value? Now, this will change, by the way. This will change in your life. And I can tell you when it's going to change, because I've seen it over and over again. Like I said, 30 years of doing this job, I've had this happen again and again. I remember the first time it happened. I was in my office, I was working, and I got a phone call from a man who was a casual church attender. Maybe a couple of times a year he'd come to church. I barely knew his name. He called me one day and he said, hey, can I come in and meet with you? And I said, of course. So he came into my office and sat down. He had just come from the doctor's office. He just got the notice that his time was up, and he knew the number of his days. Here's how long I have left. And in the office that day, do you think he wanted to talk to me about his possessions? His accomplishments? All the money he'd saved up? He had a lot of money. Think he wanted to talk to me about any of that? You know what he wanted to know? What happens to my soul now? What comes next? Now that I know that my day is here and my brief time on earth is over, what comes next? Not the first time, wasn't the only time I've had those conversations. And all of a sudden, you really care about what's going on inside. But again, how many of us cared this last week? I mean, I don't know how many of you have to-do lists. I have to-do lists. I have a to-do list at the office. I got a to-do list at home. I got a long list of things I got to do. How many of you had on your to-do list in the last week, care for your soul? Or deepen your connection to God? I mean, it just doesn't seem important to us, like I said, but it will be. In that day, you get that message, it'll matter. And all this other stuff that seems so important, it will not matter. It's why Jesus says this: I want you to learn to seek the kingdom of God above everything else. Live his way, which is righteously, and he'll give you everything you need. He said, I want you to reprioritize your life now so that what matters most is Jesus, and you want him, and you want to do his will on this planet while you're here. That's what matters most. You pursue him above everything else, because someday that is what you will want. That is what you'll want. So again, this can all be theory, but I don't want it to be. Years ago, I saw these videos from people who were dying, who talked about what it's like to be at the final stage. You can take it from them.
Well, I'm kind of every breast cancer survivor's worst nightmare, really, because I was first diagnosed in 2004 with stage 1. And I came back with my nodes clean and everything, and I did chemo, and I did the double mastectomy. I did everything right. But for some odd reason, the cancer went to the lymph node behind my breastbone, which is practically unheard of. And so it was allowed to grow there for several years. It didn't cause me any problems. And now it's in my bones, so I'm considered stage 4. And unless there's a miracle, I'm going to be going home soon. And I'm kind of double-minded about it, because there's part of me that is kind of excited in a weird way, because I know where I'm going, and it's going to be a great place. But there's this other part of me that's not ready to go yet. I'm too young. And I feel for the people that I'm leaving behind, especially my girls. Probably not going to see them grow up, I feel cheated out of grandbabies. I feel cheated out of weddings. I feel, I'm double-minded. I have this argument with myself. 2 different feelings about this same thing. And I feel for people who don't have a relationship with God and they're going through this. I don't know how they did it. I really don't. And I even feel for those people who maybe do have a relationship but don't really know him. I mean, know him to the very core of your being. Know that he is good. Know that he loves you, because sometimes it doesn't seem like that. It doesn't seem like he's good. And it doesn't seem like he loves me. But since I know that with every inch of me, that's my hope, and that's my comfort. And I really do feel for anyone who does not have that foundation. I feel like I want to be more present in the moment, because I don't have very many moments left. And so I try to enjoy every moment. And even in the mundane things, that's the harder thing to do, but even in the mundane things, I try to just enjoy it, even if that means, talking to God or singing to him, but I try not to take anything for granted, because we're not guaranteed anything, and I know I don't have many moments left, so I want to enjoy every bit of it. You've got to really have a relationship with him, not just religion, but a relationship with him, because there will be something that's going to come along that's going to knock you off your feet, and you're going to need him. And so I am just a totally different person than I was 7 years ago. But I also think I'm a lot different person than I was in May, because I am starting to number my days right and gain a heart of wisdom, It's what's important. Things aren't important. Going places, that's not important. Family, friends, relationships, that's what's important. It really is. It's the only thing that you can really, I guess, in a way, take with you in your heart, Don't expect tomorrow to come. It may not be there. You can't wait until you're sick to start living, because, to be honest with you, a lot of the time you don't feel good enough to do what you want to do, You need to start living now. Now. There's no wait until the doctor tells you. You need to fix the relationship now. You need to live in the moment now. You need to enjoy yourself and the people that you're with now. Don't wait.
I put on the back of your program a prayer at the bottom of the page. And it's just a simple way to get started in shifting your values. And if that prayer doesn't do it, rewrite it and make it your own. But here's what I want you all to hear me say before you leave today. Ready? Earth is not eternal. This isn't eternal, and you won't be here long. This is not eternal. Eternity is coming, and that's amazing and wonderful and beyond our description, and that's what we live for by shifting our values. We prioritize relationships, and the number one relationship in your life has to be God. The most important thing has to be Him. And then we prioritize our families, and then our friends. And it's time to talk about friendships again, because we've been so isolated for the last year and a half. It's time. It's time for you just to start building friendships again, being with people again. It's time for you to have people over. And even if you don't know what to do, I mean, Shannon and I just got together with some friends this last week. They want to do a little life group together. And so we took the risk and said yes, and we went, and we're going to be in this life group with them. And it doesn't have to be anything formal. You can just have people over to watch the Packers, or you can have them over to play cards, or you can just have them over. One of my favorite things I ever heard was this guy who in his 20s or 30s got a group of people together, and every other Sunday night they got together and they just ate a meal together and they laughed together and they did life together for decades. You know what he wants on his deathbed? Them. You can do that now. It doesn't have to be formal or fancy. It just needs to be a priority. Because life is all about relationships. If you're just here watching and you're just exploring this whole Christianity thing, it is primarily about a relationship with God, like I've said. You were made for Him. You were made for His purposes in this world. Do you know that? There's a purpose and a reason why He has you breathing right now. It's because there's something He wants to partner with you in this world to do. And you matter so much to Him. That the message of Christianity is this, that you and I are separated from a perfect God of love by the unloving things we've done. But Jesus is the connector. When He came to earth 2,000 years ago, He bled and died on a cross to take into Himself the things we've done that are wrong so that we could be forgiven. Let me have you bow your heads. If you want a relationship with this real God, you can just ask for it. He'll hear you. You can say something like this in your heart to Him. Say, Jesus, I don't have this all figured out. Some of this is still confusing to me. But I've heard that You died on a cross to pay for the unloving things I've said and done, and I'm sorry. I'm sorry for what I've done. And I need You. So please forgive me. I'm done with religion. I don't want rules and rituals. I want a relationship with You, a real relationship where I get to feel and experience Your love in my life. Would You make Yourself real to me in that way? In Jesus' name, amen. Now, as I finish, can I ask you all to take the little card out of your program, and even if you're a regular attender, just put your name down so we know you're here. But then maybe you prayed and asked for His forgiveness or renewed your commitment, or you have a prayer request, something you want us to pray for in your own life. You can just write that down here, then just drop it in one of the 2 offering boxes on the door, on the back wall, by the doors where you came in. But also for those of you watching online, if you go to our website at PennyhillChurchLife.com, in the upper right-hand corner of the website is a box that says "I said yes." Check that box and let us know, and you can communicate with us as a church, and we'll send you some follow-up stuff in the mail as our way of saying thanks for letting us know. So thanks all for coming. Hope to see you again next week.